Brand new week, brand new lineup of shows. Here we go with Monday. What is the one thing that you wish your child would do without having to be asked multiple times? And let's look at that time frame between the time when they wake up in the morning until the time you need to get ready to go for school. What are those things that you really wish they could just take responsibility for to show a little bit of independence? You know, middle school years, kids should be making their own lunch. They've got that whole getting dressed routine of brushing the teeth and hair. That should all be down. If it's not, maybe some of the ideas here will work for you. Parents of kids in a little bit of the younger years, 8, 10, plenty of opportunities there for these kids to be taking responsibility for getting the hair brushed, getting the teeth brushed, getting their breakfast eaten, getting the shoes on. How many times do I have to ask you to put on your shoes, please? Please, put on your shoes. And you count them up and you're like, it is like 20 some times before the kid actually put their shoes on this morning. I'm tired of this. So what is that one thing? All right. Now keep in mind the goal here, folks, is independence on the part of your child without having to necessarily affect your relationship with your child in a negative way. How do I mean? Well, there's a lot of ways to get your child to put their shoes on. Number one, you can just yell at them until they put them on. But they're not really going to love you. They're not going to really respect you. And it's pretty much a short term. Because you're going to say it once where you put your shoes on, they don't do it, and eventually, you know, you get heated, and then you're yelling. So what are they learning there? I don't need to do anything until mom or dad yells. So that's not productive. Okay? And then, of course, the other is you just continue to ask. 5, 10 minutes goes by. They learn the same thing there. They don't need to actually put the shoes on until you've asked the 21st time. So we're going to cut that out. So maybe a couple more productive ideas. Number one, okay, I always love to connect choices that kids make with natural consequences. So you choose not to put your shoes on, right? What is the natural consequence? Your feet are cold. So it doesn't really work out that way for that one. It's a whole different deal. You're not going to pack your lunch. What's the natural consequence? You're not going to have lunch. You're going to be hungry. I'm not opposed to that once in a while, okay? Well, let's come back to the shoe one for just a second, because I think this is more often the case. You know, putting your shoes on, brushing your teeth, what's the natural consequence? All right, your teeth are dirty, your feet are cold. Kids really, you know, they really don't care. But secondary to that, I have to ask the question, what happens if a child is late for school? Because even though it's not really a natural consequence, it's a consequence that's imposed by the school and not you as a parent. So you kind of remove yourself from the entire situation and the conflict there. You say, if you don't have your shoes on, you're going to be late for school. We need to leave by this time. If your shoes are not on, we're going to be late. What happens at school when you're late? So if there's a consequence in place that's kind of unpleasant for your child, then that might be motivation enough to get the teeth brushed, to get the shoes on, what have you. Because the bottom line is you're not leaving until those shoes are on. And that's assuming that you have that time in your schedule, okay? If that is not an avenue to pursue, then another idea is this. Connect that action, tying the shoes, brushing the teeth, brushing the hair, with some type of a positive consequence, incentive. Because, you know, in actuality, these are things that, yeah, it would be great if the kids would take responsibility for. But they're really things that as parents, we need to see them do, right? The kids are really not buying it. It's not that important to me. These are really things, though, that parents value. So, bottom line is, we want them to work towards independence, but we need maybe a little bit of incentive along the way. So, connecting those shoes or connecting to whatever the morning routine is, if your child is able to complete those tasks in the morning and you're in the car on time, so you give them the end time, this is when we need to leave. If these things, and don't load them up in the beginning, maybe it's just the one or two things that are really, you know, bugging you. These are the one or two things that need to be done by this time. Okay? By the age of 8, kids can look at a clock and tell you what time and match that up with the time that you wrote down. So if those things are done by that time, great. You get an extra, maybe it's 2 minutes of screen time for every day. And screen time, you know, they're watching the TV or playing the video games. One idea, okay? You can connect it to whatever you want. Something, though, that is going to be an incentive for your child to work towards. Okay? Now you're thinking, well, what happens then if I take the incentive away? Are they still going to be motivated to tie their shoes? The thing about kids is that when they get into a routine, they tend to like the routine eventually, and follow the routine. It's just what they do, especially in the morning. I mean, think about us as adults. We get up in the morning, we have a routine, we follow it. It's, it works because it gets us out the door. And kids are really no different in that respect. So we get them going on a routine, and then eventually you kind of reel back in the incentives. But keep in mind, again, the goal, folks, which is independence without damaging your relationship. So both of the ideas that I shared with you there, again, the consequence, which is not imposed by you necessarily, and the incentive, those are things that are not going to damage your relationship. And I'm not saying that, your kids got to be smiling and be happy with you all the time. I mean, there's tough choices to make as parents. We all know that. But when it comes down to, you can use one of these two ideas, or you can yell at your child until they do what you're asking them to do. I mean, come on, what's the choice, right? So a couple of new ideas for you to try, maybe. Could already be onto this, and I'm always welcoming for new ideas as well, so please send them my way. But it's a question that came up recently from one of you, which always inspires a great show. So have a great end to your Monday, and I will see you back later this week for more.